The Art of War, annotated for modern leaders. Sun Tzu's strategic wisdom for business, leadership, conflict, and power. Ancient Chinese philosophy for entrepreneurs and high performers, by Aurelian Hart. Introduction. If you walk through the heart of Atlanta today, you will see a city made of glass and steel. It feels steady and calm. Trees line the streets, and people in suits walk quickly to their next meeting. At the center of it all stands a massive building, the world headquarters of Coca-Cola. It is a symbol of a company that won. It looks like it has always been in control. But if you could step back in time to the spring of 1985, the air in that same spot felt very different. Inside those walls, there was a sense of panic that most leaders hope they never feel. One of the most successful companies in history was about to make a mistake that would go down in history books as a disaster. They were about to change the taste of the most famous drink on earth. They called it New Coke. At that time, Coca-Cola was in a bloodless war. Their rival, Pepsi, had been chipping away at their lead for years. Pepsi had started something called the Pepsi Challenge. They would ask people to take a blind taste test. Most people picked the sweeter taste of Pepsi. Coca-Cola's leaders watched their numbers drop. They felt the pressure. They felt like they had to do something, anything, to stop the bleeding. They reacted with their hearts instead of their heads. They thought the problem was the drink itself. They spent millions of dollars to create a new flavor. They launched it with huge parties and bright lights. And then the world turned against them. People didn't want a new flavor. They wanted the classic they had grown up with. Within weeks, the company was getting thousands of angry phone calls every day. They had lost their way because they let their enemy choose the battlefield. This is what happens when leaders react instead of lead. It is what happens when we let the noise of the market or the moves of our rivals dictate what we do next. The story of New Coke isn't just about soda. It is about the danger of losing your center when the stakes are high. The weight of the modern world. You probably know that feeling. It isn't just a 1980s corporate problem. It is the feeling of waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning with your mind racing. You think about the email you didn't send. You think about the competitor who just raised more money than you. You think about the team member who seems unhappy, but you aren't sure why. The world today moves faster than it ever has. Information hits us like a fire hose. We are told to hustle, to pivot, and to disrupt. We are told that if we aren't working 80 hours a week, someone else is going to take our spot. This creates a state of constant stress. We become what is called a reactive manager. A reactive manager is someone who spends their whole day putting out fires. You start your morning with a plan, but by 9:15 in the morning, that plan is in the trash. A client is mad. A server went down. A board member wants a report that isn't ready. You spend your energy chasing problems instead of building your future. You are like a boat with no rudder being pushed around by the waves of the day. This way of living is exhausting. It drains your creativity. It hurts your health. It keeps you away from your family, even when you are sitting right next to them at the dinner table, because your mind is still back at the office. You feel like you are running a race on a treadmill that keeps getting faster, and you are starting to wonder if you can ever get off. The truth is, working harder is not the answer. If hard work were the only key to success, the person who works the longest hours would always win. But we know that isn't true. The people who truly win are the ones who know how to step back. They are the ones who understand that a small, smart move is worth more than 1,000 frantic ones. They are the ones who have mastered the art of strategy. The teacher from the past. More than 2,500 years ago, a man named Sun Tzu sat down to write a book. He lived in a time of constant war in China. Kingdoms were rising and falling every year. For him, strategy wasn't just a business term. It was a matter of life and death. He saw that most leaders were led by their ego or their fear. They would rush into battle because they felt insulted, or they would stay in a fight they couldn't win because they were too proud to leave. Sun Tzu wanted to find a better way. He wrote a short book called The Art of War. It wasn't just about how to swing a sword or move an army. It was about how to think. He believed that the greatest victory is the one where you don't even have to fight. He taught that by understanding yourself, your enemy, and the world around you, you could win before the battle even started. This book has lasted for thousands of years for a reason. It has been read by kings, generals, and now the world's most successful CEOs. It is not a book about being mean or hurting people. It is a book about wisdom. It is about finding the unbeaten path, the gap where your rivals aren't looking. It is about using your energy where it matters most and keeping your cool when everyone else is losing theirs. By following these ancient lessons, you can move from being a reactive manager to becoming a strategic commander. A commander doesn't panic. A commander doesn't guess. A commander looks at the map of the world and sees the truth of the situation. They act with effortless power. This doesn't mean they don't work. It means their work actually produces results instead of just making them tired. A man on the edge. To see how this works in the real world, we need to look at someone facing these exact problems today. Meet Marcus Thorne. Marcus is 42 years old. He lives in Austin, Texas, a city that is growing as fast as his stress levels. He is the CEO of a company called Lumina Health Tech. They use data to help doctors take better care of their patients. Marcus is a brilliant person. He cares deeply about his work. He is the kind of guy who remembers everyone's birthday and stays late to help his team. On the surface, Marcus looks like he has it all. He has a beautiful wife named Sarah and 2 daughters who think he is a hero. But inside, Marcus feels like a failure. His company is in a pincer movement. This is a military term for being attacked from 2 sides at once. There is a giant company called MedGiant Corp. They are much bigger than Lumina. They have more money, more salespeople, and they are trying to price Marcus out of the market. They are like a steamroller, and Marcus is in their path. On the other side, there is trouble inside his own walls. His co-founder, Julian, has become a stranger. Julian is secretly talking to the board of directors. He wants to push Marcus out and sell the company to MedGiant. Marcus can feel the tension in every meeting, but he doesn't know how to handle it. He is conflict averse. He hates the idea of a fight. Marcus believes that if he just works harder, if he stays at his desk until 2 a.m., everything will work out. He thinks that being the nice guy will eventually be rewarded. But his health is failing. His hair is turning gray. And most importantly, he is missing the lives of his daughters. He's physically there, but his mind is always on a spreadsheet or a threatening email. One night, Marcus was sitting in his dark kitchen. The only light came from his laptop. He was looking at a report that showed the company was running out of money. He felt a deep, cold fear in his chest. He looked in his desk drawer for a pen and found an old, coffee-stained book he had bought years ago and never read. The title was The Art of War. He opened it to a random page and read, "The general who wins a battle makes many calculations in his temple ere the battle is fought." Marcus realized at that moment that he hadn't been calculating anything. He had been hoping. And hope is not a strategy. The Path to Stillness. This book is the guide that Marcus used to save his company and his life. It is the same guide you can use to transform your own world. We are going to look at Sun Tzu's wisdom and see how it fits into the office, the boardroom, and the market. We will learn about the first calculation, the way to measure your chances of success before you spend a single dollar. We will see why speed is more important than being perfect. We will learn how to win without ever having to get into a shouting match or a price war. Along the way, we will meet other masters of strategy. We will see how Admiral Yi Sun-shin defeated 133 ships with only 13 of his own. We will see how Sheryl Sandberg built a world-class operation at Facebook by using data to see the future. We will look at how Steve Jobs saved Apple by cutting out the noise and focusing on what mattered. You will learn how to spot the dust clouds that show your competitors are about to move. Find the void, the places in the market where no one is competing. Build a golden bridge that allows your rivals to retreat so they don't fight you to the death. Manage your own emotions so that you are the calmest person in the room. By the end of this journey, you will not just be better at business, you will be a different kind of leader. You will be someone who operates with personal sovereignty. This means you control your schedule and your destiny. You are no longer a slave to your inbox or your anxiety. You will have the empty cup, the ability to listen and see the truth of the situation without your ego getting in the way. The battle you are facing right now is real. The pressure is high, but you don't have to face it by simply pushing harder against a wall that won't move. There is a way around. There is a way to use the momentum of your enemies against them. There is a way to lead that brings you peace instead of burnout. The ancient wisdom is waiting. The map is already drawn. All you have to do is learn how to read it. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Mastering the First Calculation. In 512 BC, the sun rose over the kingdom of Wu, just like any other day. The birds chirped in the gardens, and the palace servants hurried about their chores. King Helu sat on his throne, feeling the weight of a world that seemed to be closing in on him. His kingdom was surrounded by enemies. His generals were brave, but they were losing. He needed something more than just courage. He needed a strategy that worked every single time. A man named Sun Tzu walked into the palace that morning. He didn't look like a warrior. He carried no heavy shield and wore no fancy armor. He carried a bundle of bamboo scrolls. These scrolls contained a set of ideas that would change the world for the next 2,000 years. The king was interested, but he was also a bit of a skeptic. He had heard many men talk about war, but few who could actually win one. The king looked at the thin man and made a strange request. He asked if Sun Tzu's rules for discipline could be applied to anyone. Sun Tzu nodded. The king then pushed the limit. He asked if Sun Tzu could train the palace ladies, the women who lived in the royal court and had never held a weapon in their lives. Sun Tzu didn't blink. He agreed. 180 women were brought into the courtyard. They were dressed in silk and wore flowers in their hair. They giggled and whispered to each other, treating the whole thing like a game. Sun Tzu divided them into two groups. He picked the king's two favorite women to be the leaders of these groups. He gave them spears and explained the rules. When the drum beat once, they were to face front. When it beat twice, they were to turn left. When it beat 3 times, they were to turn right. Sun Tzu stood before them and gave the first command. The drum echoed through the courtyard. Instead of moving, the women burst into laughter. They thought the sight of this serious man trying to order them around was funny. Sun Tzu remained calm. He said that if the orders were not clear, it was the fault of the general. He explained the rules again, slowly and clearly. He gave the command a second time. Again, the women laughed. The two leaders joined in, leaning on their spears and shaking with mirth. This time, Sun Tzu did not blame himself. He said that if the orders were clear, but the soldiers still did not obey, it was the fault of the officers. Before anyone could realize what was happening, Sun Tzu ordered the two leaders, the king's favorites, to step forward. He called for the executioner. The king, watching from his balcony, jumped up in a panic. He sent a message down, begging Sun Tzu to stop. He said he could not eat or sleep without those two women. Sun Tzu sent a message back. He told the king that once a general is in the field, he must do what is necessary for the mission, even if the king disagrees. The two women were executed on the spot. A heavy silence fell over the courtyard. The giggling stopped. The flowers in their hair seemed to wilt. Sun Tzu picked 2 new leaders and gave the command again. This time, the women moved like a single shadow. They turned, they marched, and they stood still with perfect precision. Not a single person made a sound. Sun Tzu went back to the king and told him the army was ready. But the king was too sad to look. He told Sun Tzu to go home. Sun Tzu looked at him and said that the king liked the words of strategy, but he was not ready to do the work that made strategy real. Most people believe that leadership is a feeling. They think it is something you are born with, like blue eyes or a loud voice. We are told that great leaders wing it. We see movies where a hero gives a big speech, charges up a hill, and wins because they were the bravest person in the room. This is a myth. Sun Tzu believed that victory is not a lucky accident. It is a math problem. He taught that before a single step is taken toward a goal, a leader must go to the temple to perform the calculations. In the ancient world, the temple was a quiet place where people went to think. For a modern leader, the temple might be a quiet office, a morning walk, or a simple notebook. The myth tells us that the most aggressive person wins. We think that if we just work harder, stay later, and shout louder, we will beat our competitors. But Sun Tzu tells us that many people lose their wars before they even start, because they failed to do their temple work. They jumped into the fight because they were excited, or angry, or scared. They didn't realize that the person who does the most thinking before the battle is the one who usually wins it. If you are feeling overwhelmed, it is likely because you are reacting to the world instead of calculating it. You are like the king's favorite ladies in the beginning, drifting, laughing, or maybe panicking, but not following a clear path. To find that path, you have to look at the 5 factors. These are the 5 things Sun Tzu said you must measure before you try to change anything in your business or your life. The 5 factors of every mission. The first factor is the way. In business, we often call this the mission or the culture. It is the spirit that ties a group together. When everyone from the CEO to the person answering the phones believes in the same goal, they are in the way. They will follow their leader into danger and through hard times without complaining. If your team is arguing, or if people are only working for a paycheck, you have lost the way. The second factor is the weather. This is not about rain or sun. It is about the things you cannot control. In the modern world, the weather is the economy, new laws, or a sudden change in what customers want. You cannot stop the rain, but you can carry an umbrella. A leader who ignores the weather gets soaked. A leader who watches the clouds knows exactly when to move and when to stay inside. The third factor is the terrain. This is the ground you are standing on. Is the market crowded? Is it easy for a big company to crush you? Is there a narrow pass where you can hide and grow? Terrain is about knowing the distance you have to travel and how hard the road will be. If you try to run a marathon on a mountain, the same way you run it on a flat track, you will collapse before the halfway point. This is about the person in charge. Sun Tzu said a leader must have 5 qualities: wisdom, sincerity, humanity, courage, and strictness. Notice that strictness is last. You need to be wise enough to see the truth, sincere enough to be trusted, and brave enough to act. But you also need the humanity to care for your people, and the strictness to make sure the job gets done. The 5th factor is doctrine. This is the system. It is how you organize your team. It is the set of rules that tells everyone who is in charge of what. Without doctrine, a company is just a group of people standing in a room. With doctrine, that group becomes a machine. In 1997, Apple was a mess. They were just weeks away from running out of money. The weather was terrible because Microsoft was winning the computer war. The terrain was even worse. Apple was trying to sell dozens of different products, from printers to handheld gadgets that didn't work. The way was gone. No one knew what the company stood for anymore. Steve Jobs returned to the company during this chaos. He didn't start by making a new iPhone or a fancy commercial. He went into the temple. He performed the calculations. He looked at the 70% of Apple's products and realized they were distractions. They didn't fit the way. He killed those projects, even though people had worked on them for years. He simplified the doctrine by organizing the company into a simple grid, 2 types of computers for 2 types of people. He didn't win by fighting harder. He won by looking at the 5 factors and realizing that Apple was fighting too many battles at once. He chose a narrow path, making great tools for creative people, and ignored everything else. By the time the world saw the results, the victory had already been won in a quiet room with a whiteboard and a marker. The secret real estate of a burger giant. Think about McDonald's. Most people think they are in the burger business. That is their terrain, or so it seems. But early on, a man named Ray Kroc met a smart person named Harry Sonneborn. Sonneborn performed a calculation that changed everything. He realized that if McDonald's only sold burgers, they were at the mercy of the weather, the price of beef, or the whims of hungry kids. But if they owned the land that the restaurant sat on, they would be in the real estate business. They changed their doctrine. They started buying the land and leasing it back to the people running the stores. This move made them invincible. Even if a store didn't sell many burgers one month, the land was still valuable. They won the war because they calculated a factor that their competitors didn't even know existed. Marcus and the shadow in the boardroom. Marcus Thorne sat in his home office at 2 o'clock in the morning. The only light came from his computer screen and a small desk lamp. In the kitchen, he could hear the hum of the refrigerator. It was a mundane, quiet sound that felt very far away from the chaos in his head. He looked at a coffee-stained copy of The Art of War that he had found in the back of his desk. He had spent the last year working 90-hour weeks, trying to outrun a giant competitor called MetGiant. He thought that if he just stayed up later than their CEO, he would win. But his company, Lumina Health Tech, was bleeding cash. His lead investor had just told him he had 90 days to fix it, or he was out. Marcus picked up a pen and a yellow legal pad. He drew 5 columns, one for each of Sun Tzu's factors. When he got to the way, his hand stopped. He thought about his co-founder, Julian. They had started this company to help people get better healthcare. But lately, Julian only talked about the exit. Julian wanted to sell the company to the highest bidder and go sit on a beach. Marcus wanted to build a legacy. For the first time, Marcus saw the truth. Their way was split. They were an army trying to march in 2 different directions at the same time. No wonder the employees were confused. No wonder the work was slowing down. He looked at the weather. The market was shifting toward privacy. MedGiant was old and slow. They didn't handle data privacy well. That was a storm Marcus could use. He looked at the terrain. MedGiant owned the big cities, but the rural hospitals, the small places in the middle of nowhere, were being ignored. As the sun began to peek through his window, Marcus didn't feel tired anymore. He felt sober. He realized that his hard work had been a mask for his lack of thought. He had been a reactive manager, jumping every time his phone buzzed. Now, he was starting to look like a commander. He saw the internal rot for what it was. He knew that before he could fight MedGiant, he had to fix the way inside his own office. How to perform your calculations. You do not need an ancient temple to find your strategy. You only need the honesty to look at your situation without lying to yourself. Most leaders fail because they see the world the way they want it to be, not the way it actually is. Audit your way. Ask yourself if everyone on your team would give the same answer if asked, "Why are we doing this?" If the answers are different, your army is divided. You must stop everything and fix this first. A team that doesn't believe in the mission will desert you when the weather turns bad. Watch the weather. Look at your industry. What is changing that you cannot stop? Don't complain about it. Don't wish it were different. Instead, ask how you can use that change to your advantage. If a new law makes things harder for everyone, it is actually an opportunity for you to be the one who figures it out first. Map the terrain. Where is your competition strongest? Do not go there. Sun Tzu says to avoid what is strong and strike what is weak. Find the void, the customers who are being ignored, or the problems that are too small for the big companies to bother with. Check your leadership. Be honest about your own state of mind. Are you acting out of courage or out of fear? Are you being strict with your standards, or are you letting things slide because you want to be liked? A leader who wants to be everyone's friend eventually becomes no one's leader. Refine your doctrine. Look at your daily systems. If you disappeared for a month, would your business keep running? If the answer is no, your doctrine is weak. You have a hero culture instead of a unit culture. You need to build systems that allow your people to succeed without you holding their hands. The mental map. Sun Tzu's first chapter is about the mental map you create before you ever leave your house. If the map is wrong, the journey will be a disaster. Most people spend all their energy on the journey, the emails, the meetings, the hustle. They spend almost no time on the map. When you master the first calculation, you gain a strange kind of peace. You stop worrying about what your competitors are doing because you have already accounted for them. You stop panicking when the weather changes because you already have your umbrella ready. This is the beginning of the unbeaten path. It is a way of leading where you use your brain so well that you don't have to exhaust your body. It is the realization that a single hour of deep, honest calculation is worth a month of frantic, thoughtless activity. Marcus Thorne put down his pen. The yellow legal pad was covered in notes. He looked at the name Julian, circled in red under the way column. It was going to be a hard day. He might have to do something as difficult as Sun Tzu did in that palace courtyard. But for the first time in a year, Marcus knew exactly what he had to do. He wasn't guessing anymore. He was calculating. The sun was up now, fully lighting the room. The mundane routine of the world was starting again. People were waking up, checking their phones, and preparing to react to whatever happened to them. But Marcus was different. He was no longer a slave to the chaos. He was the commander of his own destiny. He had found the way, and the path forward, though steep, was finally clear. Chapter 2. Speed. Why momentum trumps perfection. There is no instance of a country having benefited from prolonged warfare. Sun Tzu wrote those words over 2,000 years ago, but in May 1940, the French High Command acted as if they had never heard them. They sat in their stone offices, surrounded by thick maps and heavy rotary phones. They felt safe. They had spent years and billions of francs building the Maginot Line. It was a massive wall of forts, tunnels, and guns buried deep in the earth along the German border. To the French, it was a masterpiece of defense. It was perfect. But perfection is a slow-moving target. While the French generals waited for the perfect war to come to them, a different kind of army was gathering in the dark woods of the Ardennes. The German forces didn't want a long war. They couldn't afford one. Their economy was strained, and their resources were thin. They knew that if the fight lasted through the winter, they would lose. They didn't have the luxury of being perfect. They only had the luxury of being fast. The French expected a repeat of the First World War. They thought the battle would be a slow, grinding crawl through the mud. They figured they had weeks, maybe months, to move their troops into place once the first shot was fired. General Maurice Gamelin, the man in charge of the French army, didn't even have a radio in his headquarters. He preferred to send messages by couriers on motorcycles. He wanted reliable information. He wanted to be sure. He wanted to be right. On May 10th, the German tanks, the Panzers, burst through the impassable forest. They didn't stop to secure every town. They didn't wait for their supply trucks to catch up. They didn't even wait for orders from the top. The tank commanders had one rule: keep moving. They called it Schwerpunkt, the center of gravity. Find the weakest spot and hit it with everything you have. Then keep driving until the enemy's head is spinning. By the time Gamelin's motorcycle couriers arrived with reports of the invasion, the information was already 6 hours old. By the time the French orders reached the front lines, the German tanks were 50 miles past the locations mentioned in the messages. The French were playing chess, while the Germans were playing a high-speed video game. The Maginot Line, that multi-billion-dollar perfect defense, was bypassed in a matter of days. It became a monument to a slow mind. This is the essence of Sun Tzu's second lesson. Speed is the only thing that can save you from the cost of conflict. The high cost of the long wait. Sun Tzu's second chapter, Waging War, isn't really about the glory of the fight. It is about the math of the fight. He begins by listing the costs of taking an army into the field. 1,000 fast chariots, 1,000 heavy wagons, and enough food to feed 100,000 men. He talks about the 1,000 ounces of silver, spent every single day on repairs, glue, paint, and armor. He wasn't trying to scare the king. He was trying to wake him up. He wanted the leader to understand that every day you are at war. Whether that war is a military campaign or a product launch, you are burning through your life force. In the modern world, we call this the burn rate. If you are a leader at a startup, you know exactly what this feels like. You look at your bank account and see a certain amount of millions. Then you look at your monthly costs, office rent, cloud server fees, and the salaries of 20 engineers. You realize that if you don't win, meaning get to profit or find more funding, in the next 12 months, your company dies. Sun Tzu's warning is simple.